Hi guys, UK Guns here. So you may have seen in my last video I introduced you to long barrel pistols and kind of explained what they are and why they are. But I didn't really go into my specific long barrel pistol, which is this one, the GSG Firefly. So in this video I'm going to talk about the Firefly and basically tell you a little bit about it. So the Firefly has a bit of a complicated history, but it's quite interesting. Basically, this started out life as a SIG P226. Well, as a SIG. Originally, the design was a P226. So Sig Sauer have the P226, which is a 9mm semi-automatic pistol, and it's quite popular. They sell it all around the world to police and military and to civilians in certain countries as well. And basically, they decided they wanted to make a 2.2 version of it. So for whatever reason, they either didn't have the tooling to do it themselves, or they just wanted someone else to make it for them. So they approached GSG, being another German company. They approached GSG and said, would you make the 2.2 version of a SIG P226 for us? And we want to call it the SIG Mosquito. And so GSG obviously agreed and begun manufacturing the SIG Mosquito. And they sold that for a number of years under license from SIG until just recently, in 2015 in fact, when for reasons I'm not quite sure of, but I'm sure someone may know and can leave a comment, SIG decided that they no longer wanted to make the Mosquito, and so they cancelled the contract. GSG, however, felt that it was still worth continuing to sell the pistol, so they decided to sell it under their own branding as the GSG Firefly. So what that means is this is essentially a SIG, but by GSG. So the design was from SIG, it was based on their P226. The only sort of significant differences between this and the P226 is firstly it's about 10% smaller, and that's to accommodate the smaller cartridge of 2.2, and it has an ambidextrous manual safety on the back of the slide there, which the P226 doesn't. Other than that, it's styled aesthetically and functions in very much the same way as the P226. So what that means is you're essentially buying a SIG. And full disclosure, I'm not, paid or sponsored by GSG in any way. Wish I was, but I'm genuinely not. I picked this up from my local gun shop. But I do quite like the idea that this is a very, very economic pistol in terms of it's not an expensive one, and I'll come on to pricing in a minute. But you're basically buying a SIG, which is pretty cool. It's a SIG design, and it was made to SIG specifications. So to talk about pricing, so first off, there are sort of a couple of pistols, long barrel pistols in the UK that are quite popular. There's this, the GSG 1911, and you've got the Walther PPQ. There are of course others, but they're like some of the big ones that you'll see quite a lot at rifle clubs and ranges around the country. Now, the 1911 is long established, but the two that kind of directly compete with one another would be the Firefly and the PPQ, and that's because they're the only two really that are like modern pistols, modern kind of semi-automatic tactical style pistols, the tactical Tupperware type thing with a polymer lower, Picatinny rail, all that kind of stuff. But a Walther PPQ, albeit it is a Walther licensed by Walther, that sets you back about £900, which is quite a bit of money, whereas one of these will set you back about half of that at about £450, which is significantly less, and I don't see why there's such a big difference in price. I mean, this seems like a really good quality gun. As I say, it was made for SIG, 2 SIG specifications. It's very good quality from what I've experienced of it. I've heard lots of good things about it. I've read good reviews, all that kind of thing. Not saying the Walther PPQ isn't good. I'm sure it's great, and I've read good things about that as well. And I was tempted to get one of those until I saw the price of these. I just don't know why you pay double. You could literally have 2 of these for the cost of one Walther. The downside is they do just come with 1 magazine. So you do have to get extra magazines because the magazines are a 10-round magazine, and obviously that's not enough really. It's quite common for 2.2 pistols to only have 10-round magazines, but to have only 1 magazine, I got 2 extra. So I bought this with 3 magazines. But the magazines aren't expensive either, about 25 to 30 pounds per magazine, which isn't too bad really. So overall, I thought this was great value. So I'll introduce you to some of its features. Now first off, this gun is clear. I always clear all of them before I do these videos. That's the torch there. Obviously, it doesn't come with a torch. That's something I stuck on. But it's got the Picatinny rail, so you can mount a laser or a torch or anything like that onto it if you so wish. That's one I had just knocking around, so I thought it would look pretty cool to stick it on there. So the functions then, just like the P226 really, at the front here we've got the disassembly lever, which you just rotate 180 degrees to the front to take the slide off. Behind that we've got the decocker, so the decocker is pretty good. It enables you to drop the hammer without striking the firing pin, like that. And then behind that you've got the slide stop, so that's for holding back and releasing the top slide. And then of course on the top there you've got the ambidextrous manual safety. And then of course here is the magazine release catch. It's got a polymer frame and then a metal upper. I believe it's aluminium alloy. It's fairly lightweight. Obviously the counterweight rod and the long barrel does give it a bit of extra heft compared to a standard size pistol, but it's certainly not a heavy gun in any way. The sights are pretty decent. Don't know if you'll be able to see those on camera. They're not fibre optic sights, but they are like sort of high visibility, sort of yellow greenish dot sights. They are adjustable as well. They are adjustable for windage on the rear sight, and the front sight, rather than being adjustable, it comes with 3 different sights that are different heights, and so you can change that depending on where your point of impact is. So each sight at 25 yards changes the point of impact by 7.5 inches. So you can get it to where you need it to be and adjust the rear sight for windage. Not perfect, but it's pretty good, and I was able to get it fairly consistent by changing the front sight. I went for the medium size because I found it comes, I think, with the tallest sight installed. That wasn't working for me, so I changed to the medium one. That's working a lot better. And then, like I say, you can adjust the rear sight for windage as well. So that's about it really. I say 10 round magazines. Magazines are pretty decent. They're fairly solid, fairly sturdy. I have heard some people saying that if you drop them on the ground, they have a tendency for the base plate to fall off, spring come flying out, and then you have to sit there and fiddle to reassemble them. But I haven't had that happen, but I haven't dropped them, to be fair. But I have disassembled the magazines just to see how easy or difficult that was. And whilst disassembling any magazine from any firearm is usually a real pain in the backside. These aren't any different, but they're not any more difficult than any other magazine that I've disassembled. It's the same sort of thing. You just take off the base plate by depressing this plunger here, and then out comes your spring and your follower and all the rest of it. And then you just got to put it all back in, line it up, and get the base plate back on again. So a tad fiddly, but not anything. If you've disassembled a magazine before from most types of firearms, it's no different. So that's about it really I can say on the GSG. Like I say, so far I'm really impressed with the value of it. It's really affordable, I think, for what it is. Aesthetically, I think it's a really nice looking gun. Obviously it's based on the CP226 and it looks really cool, if you ask me. Obviously I know it's got the counterweight rod, and there'll be lots of people saying, oh, what is that, it's ugly, it's horrible, etc. All I say is just bear in mind, if you live in a country where you can get regular size handguns, you're very lucky. Not everybody is so lucky. This is what we have access to here. We're grateful that we can access what we can and enjoy the sport in the ways that we can. But this is all we've got. So, that's what we have to do with. But other than that, I think, given the obvious things, I don't think it's too bad looking. And I've put about 300 rounds through this so far. A few stoppages, mostly they were failure to feed. Could just be teething, breaking in. It certainly wasn't anything significant. Out of 300 rounds, I probably had 5 or 6 stoppages, so it's pretty low. Maybe 10 at the most. I'm not sure. I didn't keep count, but it's pretty low number of stoppages. And like I say, that could just well be breaking in as kind of teething problems. I know my Smith & Wesson, for instance, my M&P 1522, when I first got that, it had a lot of stoppages, which I was quite surprised by because I'd heard such good things about it. And now I've probably put 10,000 rounds through it, and now I get hardly any. I can go, hundreds and hundreds of rounds before getting a single stoppage. So, there is a bit of a breaking in time for most guns, and I think this one's probably no different. So there we go, that's the GSG Firefly. I will make another video on how to strip and assemble, and at some point when I've got a few more rounds through this and a bit more range time, I'll probably do an update and give you my thoughts as to what I think. As always, thanks for watching.